intimidating.
Good.
It's much more intimidating.
All right, folks, we're ready.
Oh, am I chairing this committee?
I don't know.
I actually, at some point, I became
Lori's-
the chair.
Em-
Totally.
Thanks a lot, Emily. Now I'm in trouble.
I forgot, yes, it says so right here. All right. So I will open the public meeting at this time. And then, do we have any public comment? Going once, going twice. Okay. And then moving on to item, approval of minutes, which was like more than 6 months ago. And so,
That's the beauty of audit.
yeah,
Confession, I didn't read the minutes. I like that was,
It-
they were fine by me.
okay.
Chris?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
good.
Okay, you're good.
Yeah.
We're good with the minutes.
Wow.
Those of us who read it. And now we're moving on to the claims auditor quarterly report for quarter one and quarter one, or is that supposed to be quarter one and quarter two? Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Oh, that's what, okay.
Test.
So just as a reminder for folks, we used to have Nora who would come and do the
Yeah.
quarterly reports with us, right? And that was a service through BOCES. And now we actually have, we moved away from that service and we have Courtney who comes in every week and goes through our all of our purchasing and make sure that we're aligned with the policy. And so Courtney could not be here with us this evening, but you'll notice that the reports look a little bit different, but it's the same things, right? Purchase orders that were not open prior to a purchase, but we understand they're legitimate. So we've been doing a lot of work on like getting principals to send us authorizations just after, so we have record keeping. I think once we work on that P card, that's going to save a lot of those issues, and the board approved that last night. And that's a purchasing card. That's like a credit card, but it is controlled. It's tied to a purchase order. It has a certain set amount. You can use it only at certain vendors, right? So it's very regulated, which is
Okay.
really fantastic for us because we think that this is just going to be a great tool to take away a lot of these
Oh, that's great.
these issues. Yeah,
And
yeah.
who will use that? Have
We think we have a plan of just trying to pilot it in a couple of departments first, things like pre-K transportation. Those are the ones that really like either need on-demand checks or they have frequency in terms of their supply needs, right? They're doing this project, they need this. A bus driver's going for an overnight trip, we need to get them to a hotel, right? Those sorts of things. So we'll pilot it there. And so there's a policy that goes along with that. We talked about that last night. And then, hopefully a lot of this, kind of the shopping pre-invoice or pre-PO will go away because you'll have that card and we can set it up so that there are parameters for you to be able to use it. But again, it stops at a certain point. And if somebody loses it, we can turn it off. There's some really great features to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
The other thing that we'll be able to see some improvement on, there are a couple comments about referees and the POs being opened after the invoice. We've just started using a new system called Arbiter Sport, where we pay in a bulk amount to Arbiter and then they pay the referees for us. So that relieves a lot of the burden of getting all of these a lot of referees paid, and they all have different rates for their mileage and different reimbursement rates. So this is going to help both the athletics office and the business office in terms of making sure we have a PO that's open before we're paying these referees. So
So the process for approving the PO, what's the process for that?
So we will pay into Arbiter, and then Arbiter basically takes that money then as part of their service, and they pay and arrange the referees for us going forward. So we will not have to have any of these POs anymore. We just have one to Arbiter.
Wow.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, but then who
Wow.
makes the decision though, like when it's an eligible, Arbiter makes that or?
They have to vet the referees. They have to make sure that they're following like proper procedures. Like there are rules and regulations over, when we hire a referee, who qualifies to, be showing up for certain sports. And so they take all of that liability on their end, and then they are paying the
Wow.
refs.
And they have to get signed off prior to the year for the schedule and by the AD.
Yeah.
In order to qualify for that. No, the old system was. Now with the Arbiter, I'm not sure, but I think that's got to be part of the process still.
Yeah. Arbiter would be still having to set up an arrangement with the referees and have them approved in advance. So,
Thank you.
And sometimes getting the referees at the last minute, you
Yeah.
don't know who you're gonna get. So then all of a sudden you have that challenge of getting a referee at the last minute. Not enough time to get that PO processed
Sure.
for the event that's happening. Because it's all last minute stuff. So this will help.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, are we moving on?
Good.
Okay, sorry. So next item is the draft internal audit risk assessment update from John Harvey, who is with us via Zoom.
Good evening. I'm only going to take a few minutes of your time this evening, and I'll tell you why in a few moments. But as mentioned, this is the required annual risk assessment for the district for 2022-23. And I've highlighted a portion of the cover letter that's in the report that says the purpose of the engagement is to assist you in improving the process by which you monitor and manage the risks that face the district. However, it is ultimately your responsibility to assess the adequacy of your risk management system. As a result, there's no corrective action plan required for the annual risk assessment. That's only for the focused area of audit, which this year the district has chosen extra classroom. So for this report, there's no required corrective action plan. There's not even a requirement to have this presented like I'm doing this evening. For those of you who were through this and saw the report last year, this is going to look like deja vu because the report is exactly the same as it was the year before, the exact same comments and recommendations as you had the year before. So as a result, I'm just going to move through it very, very quickly. You can stop me if you have any questions, but I tend to just move through it quickly at a high level because again, it's exactly the same report as it was a year ago. So I'm going to move to the pages that start the findings. So it starts with the prior year's comments and recommendations. The page number at the bottom is 4. If you have the hard copy or electronic version of the report on your screens. There were some in the cash controls area that the board doesn't have a policy for petty cash, and the recommendation is that you should have one. That there's no formalized procedure regarding handling cash in the buildings. The recommendation is that one should be created. That the district does not have a dedicated terminal for electronic banking transactions, and the recommendation is that you should have one. In the fixed assets area, there's no formalized disposal form when fixed assets are disposed of. The recommendation is that steps should be taken to develop a form so you can keep better track of what assets you have and where they are at any given time. Also, the district doesn't conduct regular updates of the fixed asset inventory. The process is only conducted once a year at the end of the year. So fixed assets end up going into service in the district before the end of the year that are not tagged. So we recommend that you more frequently update fixed asset inventory to ensure that they are tagged. However, the IT department does tag items that meets the threshold as they arrive. So we're talking about items other than technology. The district hasn't assigned anyone to track fixed assets. So consequently, the district doesn't tag them when they're placed into service, as I just mentioned. And fixed assets are moved from one location to another and are not tracked other than those that are IT. So we recommend that, you have an individual who has that responsibility, who can maintain and update the fixed asset inventory program. In the transportation department, there is no formal parts inventory program. So we recommend that you have one to minimize the risk of over or under stocking items and also the possibility of any misuse of district property. The transportation department's room for storing parts and supplies is open during the normal operating hours, and there's no restriction to access. And there are several cameras in the transportation department, but none of them focus on the parts room. So our recommendation was that you consider improving the security over that area. Transportation department doesn't have a formal process to identify and dispose of obsolete inventory. Our recommendation is that someone be assigned to identify obsolete inventory, and a formal process should be created to identify and dispose of it. Also in the transportation area, we know the district has an unwritten rule that allows mechanics to work on their personal vehicles in the transportation garage after hours. A recommendation is that there should be a board policy or written administrative procedure regarding the procedures and guidelines for employees working on their personal vehicles after hours. Under IT, there is no policy or procedure in place for controlling sensitive data that can be downloaded onto a movable device. The district should devise a policy or procedure that relates to information that could be downloaded to a movable device, and it should state how to handle a potential breach of security and how to contain the sensitive data. The district does have an acceptable use policy regarding access to the network and internet. However, staff are not required to sign or acknowledge the acceptable use agreement prior to being allowed onto the network and the internet. Our recommendation is that all users of the network should be required to sign an agreement stating they understand the district's acceptable use policy. It should be signed at least at the beginning of employment. And you could also institute a screen pop or a splash screen instead of having a signed form that has to be acknowledged every time the user accesses the system. That's the most common thing that I see in school districts. All users with assigned equipment are given local administrative rights to load software and change settings. As a result, your data could be at increased risk of being subject to manipulation and errors. Administrator accounts give an individual unlimited access to the computer system. Therefore, they should only be used when installing software and configuring system parameters, particularly by the IT staff. At all other times, they should operate as restricted users, and only authorized IT personnel should retain an administrative account. The district does not have a formal disaster recovery plan, and obviously, as a result, none has ever been tested. The district should develop, adopt, and test a formal disaster recovery plan to ensure you're able to recover from an unexpected interruption in operations such as ransomware or any other attack on your system. Moving to extra classroom. The extra classroom advisors and central treasurers at the middle schools have not had recent training related to their duties. Our recommendation is that at least yearly, they be trained in the education department's rules and regulations regarding safeguarding, accounting, and auditing of extra classroom activity funds. The clubs are not consistently reconciling their club ledger balances to the club balances maintained by the central treasurers. Recommendation is that should be done monthly. The number of signatures required for disbursement checks was not consistent. For example, the Boynton Middle School and Lehman Alternative Community School only required one signature. And the recommendation is that the number of signatures required be consistent throughout the district to implement strong internal controls. The treasurers who perform bank recs are directly responsible also for the accounting and have signature authority. In addition, the reconciliations are not reviewed until the end of the year by the financial auditors. We recommend someone separate from the treasurers review the bank statements prior to being routed for reconciliation. And a review of the statement prior to the reconciliation will add a level of security against fraud. And additionally, recommended that they be reviewed on a monthly basis as opposed to once a year. Also, in extra classroom was noted that the policies have not been updated in recent years. The district should devise an extra classroom policy. And there's a lot of information as to what policies need to be updated and how they can be worded in the state education department guidance. Also, for extra classroom, we noted that the clubs are not consistently keeping meeting minutes. The recommendation is that they be kept in accordance with the New York State guidelines. We noted that the clubs at the middle school are not consistently preparing fundraising request forms or profit and loss statements. Recommendation is that they are prepared and completed, again, in accordance with the state guidelines. Under facilities, the district has not developed a fee schedule for outside groups that utilize the district's facilities. Recommendation is that you consider creating a fee schedule to allow you to recoup costs that are incurred as a result of facility rentals. Under the food program, the fund balance in the program is in excess of 3 months of operating expenditures. Per the New York State Comptroller, federal regulations limit the allowable school lunch fund balance to 3 months average operating expenditures, so the district should consider ways to reduce that fund balance to the allowable level. The amount of startup cash funds was not in the reorganizational meeting of the board. Recommendation is that it should be. District doesn't receive any report from the vending machine vendor of inventory that was sold during the month. And the district should ensure, the recommendation is that you should ensure you're receiving appropriate documentation from the vendor and should be following up with the vendor. Under employee attendance, for all district employees other than teachers, the entries that they input into the system that deduct from their paid time off bank, the employees make those entries themselves. Supervisors have the ability to check them, but they're not required to approve them. So essentially, the district is relying on good faith of the employee self-reporting. District recommendation is that you should develop a process to ensure that they are accurately self-reporting paid time off, and could be achieved in a number of ways, and some of them are listed in the report here. Financial reporting and budgeting as of the date of the risk assessment report, which was December. The report from the Office of the Comptroller was not posted on the district's website. Education law mandates that you post those on your website. The report is in board docs, but that is not technically in compliance with the law. It needs to be on the district's website. Under banking, the child nutrition program startup funds are not returned to the business office at the end of the school year. They should return those startup funds at the end of the school year. That's in accordance with commissioners' regulations. Under human resources, there's no operating procedure in place for the department. The recommendation is that one is developed. The district doesn't execute consistent procedures in regards to retirements and terminations. And the district doesn't use a checklist of the necessary steps that should take place whenever there is a termination. The district should consider setting some policy requiring exit interviews, establishing standard practices governing who conducts them, what documentation is required, and a final checklist of things that are necessary when an employee leaves the organization. Under purchasing, staff that perform claims auditing at the BOCES, CBO, noted that it is a common occurrence in various buildings across the district that there are confirming purchase orders. I just heard about P cards that should help alleviate some of this issue. The district should ensure that a purchase order is in place prior to ordering goods and services. Under operations and maintenance, the director of facilities does not receive monthly fuel consumption reports from the transportation department to review for unreasonable transactions. They should get a report so that they can review for reasonableness and try to identify any irregular fuel transactions. And as far as I mentioned, issues in the current year, there were no additional issues in the current year. And then there's a list of comments that were cleared over the last few years. So I went through that, as I said, very quickly because it is the same report as it was a year ago. And I'd be happy to take any questions or comments that you have at this time.
I have one question. There are a lot of different things here. Would there be some that you would prioritize over others?
So if you look at the, let's see, what page is this? The assessment of risk on page 3, those that are moderate/high would probably take highest priority. So those would be the lunch program issues that were mentioned, the fixed assets issues that were mentioned, the inventory at the facilities and operations, and the IT comments that were mentioned. And then from there, obviously, you could move to moderate and then to low moderate and then to low.
And I'm going to jump in here. John, this is Amanda Verb. I'm the Chief Operations Officer. Thank you for joining us this evening to do that report. In October, just so you know, I created a sort of a policy improvement guidance document for folks like myself, Zach, Bob, Dan, right? Folks that are kind of overseeing all those departments. As you know, some of the things that we're addressing in the 6,000 series of board policy, the petty cash would fall under that. And then obviously what I did was I tried to relate it directly to any current board policies that would need to be updated with a little guidance document for, colleagues. And then I also used the code like TBC to be created, if we decided that that was something we could do. So, we will continue to refer to that sort of tool. And then obviously this is the reference document that we go to for further detail, that John has shared with us this evening.
How long do we see a turnaround time for the top priority ones to get things implemented?
So, I'm gonna look at some of the top priorities. I know one of the things that I think for me, and I don't, John, I'm on like two screens, so I'm looking at what you have posted here. One of the things that I had listed, and I'm sure it's somewhere on this list, was our cybersecurity, right, and the need for that. And so for me, that is something that we're dealing with right now, that it feels very high. We're working with our insurance company to get the proper coverage for that. So that one I can say, I think for us, data management, people getting into those data management tools like that is a priority for us. So, Chris, we can correct that one right now. I know in terms of things posted on like the budget website, right? Like those are easy to do. I wouldn't call those high priorities. I know that we're doing a lot of work, like I said, with the P card. So I think for me, the purchasing piece coming back from COVID specifically, where we really, I don't want to say that you threw, you remembered that the rules were there and you softened them to support the immediacy of the needs of what was happening. I think people as we're coming back from that, to re-educate and re-norm is really where we're focusing our efforts right now. And obviously policy follows or aligns with that, right? Extra class really, I think, got turned on its head over the COVID, and they, again, kids that were leaders who were trained forgot, or they didn't, or they couldn't pass that on to the next person because we weren't, we weren't in school together. So, re-sharing, we just reshared that our little policy book. I just did quick adaptations to that and sent it over to the high school and a few other places. We've been working around with LACS specifically on sort of how trips and extra class blend, and it's really difficult to sort of tease those out. To me, that's a high priority, and we're working on that right now. So, I know Bob has HR systems in place as he has the team and working on that. And I know Dan oversees transportation, food service, which we're working on the fund balance. That's actually also being worked on right now.
And that'll be resolved by June 30th of this year. We had to report that to child nutrition with the state. We had to give them a plan of how that fund balance is going to be spent down and within the limits that it needs to be at, that 3 months of expenditures, and that will be achieved by June 30th.
Right. And then I think, we have new leadership also in facilities. And so I think as systems evolve, I think you're going to see changes that would align more with what John was speaking to.
So the comments that John was saying was, when was that audit actually done? Because it seems like some of it was done and then you've made some changes since.
Right. So John, what you reflected was essentially listed last year in the risk assessment. So this is a risk assessment, right? Right, John, I don't want to speak for you. Maybe if you want to just give an overview of that.
So every year there's a requirement to update whatever the existing risk assessment report was from the prior year. So I did my work in the fall of this school year. The report, I think, was issued in early December. So what you see in the report is an update from the report that was done the year before. And there, again, because of, I don't want to speak for the district, but I think you've already heard, because of COVID, there was, it was difficult to make improvements in a number of these areas in the risk assessment, but now we're kind of post-COVID, so it's a little bit different scenario.
Makes sense.
And then from an audit perspective and in John's report, at the bottom of what's labeled page 1 and then at the top of page 2, those were the audits, right? So and they actually have a list of them from 2009, 2010 to last year. And those are, last year we did when we were in negotiations with the Employees Association, there was conversations about severance payouts and the way that we were recording vacation or sick, like personal time, right? And then what that meant as you left employment. And so that audit was very targeted audit for that purpose, because that came up in negotiations. We really couldn't, it was a systems issue. It wasn't, right? We actually had a negotiated contract that had language, and then there wasn't a system that was following that. So we wanted to audit that to get a tool to be able to correct that without it being the district or the Employees Association saying, oh, we got to do that. The year before that, right, was the device issuance and tracking, and John spoke to that as the audit. And then that before that was timesheets, inventories, athletics. You could see this year it will be extra class again, because we know that that system got turned a bit on its head with COVID. It will be audits. Sydney, Emily, we all agree, right? As business officials, it's like, these are tools. They're not gotchas. They're not, negative reports. They're actually guidance documents for you to be able to analyze what is strong and what is practices that needs to be improved. And those help you build then the educational tools to retrain and re-engage all the people that are doing that work. So our hope for extra class is really going to be just that, right? We have, again, new leadership at the high school running all the activities programs. There's the middle school folks, some of them are relatively new. We want to make sure that we're doing that right. And the audit is a great tool to guide you with that.
Oh, John.
A yellow question?
Yes.
I think just to make sure I understand, I don't.
We can hear you.
I
I
think
think.
it just as a legal question understands the connection between IT data and an audit report.
John, do you want to explain the connection between IT data and the audit report?
I think data.
Data. No, I'm from New Jersey, Sean. I change everything.
You said it's got, so.
So just to be clear again, this is a risk assessment report. This is not an audit report on IT or any of the other areas. These are just what we do is we go through a number of questions in a narrative fashion, sitting down with various folks in various areas to just try to assess level of risk based on the questions that we are asking and the information that we are being given. So again, this is a risk assessment report. The risk assessment report in the IT areas indicated that there were a few things that the district might want to contemplate, either improving or taking some action on, or could decide that is there are other controls are in place and those are recommendations, are not necessary. But as far as the connection between IT and this report, it's one of many areas, I think 16 different areas in the district that we look at to try to assess if there is some risk there in those areas. And what we're, as Amanda pointed out, our job in this risk assessment really is to try to help you to identify those areas and make improvements if warranted in those areas. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Sean, the other thing too, I'm looking, there's a corrective action plan that Zach wrote. I know already, just from a user standpoint, the number of times we have to change our passwords now, right? Versus when the audit was done. I know that Zach, the use, I think Clever came on board before that, right? Or from the audit till now, which is like the portal that then you can get your apps on. And so I think they've done a lot of work. Canvas, moving to the Canvas system for student information, right? And student work. I know Zach is constantly talking about it, so maybe if it's not a focus point this year because we're doing extra class, but a gentle revisit of one of the audit committees of just coming in saying, how are we doing? What's the progress? And being able to ask the questions directly to those leaders, just like we do in finance committee, I think might be good.
This is just a thought, hearing the report where in it says, nothing was done. But then since the report was done, so the report was done like in the fall, the analysis was done in the fall. It looks like a lot of things actually have been or in progress for addressing it. And I wonder for public purposes, whether it might be useful to make some little notes of our spring progress on this issue, this is underway. I mean, from the public's perspective, they might appreciate knowing that.
Because it looks so damning when you.
Yeah, and I think, John's report does have some summaries of what, there are some, progress statements sort of underneath the boxes, right? Just like where we are, but and to your point, thank you I always forget that shining a little light on the good work that we're doing is never a bad thing. And so we do take these things very seriously. To capture that in one tool, right? I'll think about how we can do that.
Well, it's almost like if you had the report and then, just a series of notes, it's like, I'm just looking, it's like on note 1, and it's like this, because it's been really helpful to hear what you're actually working with, and it adds a level of kind of information that isn't in this report if you just read it.
Well, and we want people to have confidence that this is a guidance document for us. We can't get to everything all at once.
Yeah.
And to Chris's point, thank you for asking, what's the priority, right? Because I think to try to do it all is, it's for me, I will own it. It's budget season. That's really difficult to find the time. But during the summer, there's a lot of things that we can be doing for improvement, for sure.
And to that point, this reminds me a little bit about district legal counsel, who at all costs tries to protect the district, no matter what the end result is. And John, if you can hear me, my assumption is that your job is to protect the district at all costs. So even the slightest possible risk you're identifying. And if we look at the sheet, a good number of them say low risk, right? So it's, yes, we should get to it, but we're not, the district is not in great jeopardy, right? And I don't know if that's your analysis, but I'd like to hear if it is your analysis. There are a couple of high risk things that we have to address, but most of it is you're looking for every single possible risk that we may experience. Is that a fair analysis, gentlemen?
Well, it's certainly not comprehensive in that way. I mean, we have developed audit programs for we being Questar, BOCES, who you have contracted with for the internal audit function, has developed audit programs for the various areas, and it attempts to identify areas of risk, but it certainly is not comprehensive to identify every single possible area of risk in any area, because it's all we have to do really is turn on the news and you hear about how AI and everything else is just exploding, and there's so many things that are potentially risk management issues But we try to identify as many as are commonly known throughout the state, and the audit reports that other internal auditors have done, external auditors have done, and the state comptroller's office has done. And also the guidance documents that the state has put out related to the accounting and safeguarding of assets in the general fund and the extra classroom activity fund. So the report's purpose, as I've highlighted here, I think you see on your screen, is the purpose is to assist you in improving the process by which you monitor and manage the risks that face the district. And however, it is ultimately your responsibility to assess the adequacy of your risk management system. So we are here, as Amanda stated earlier, to help you in that regard. We're here to give you tools to help you be able to identify things in a way that you don't either have the time or the manpower to assess on your own. And this is a guidance document. It should not be looked at as every possible risk that there might be in the Ithaca City School District is identified in this report.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, clearly, you know, it reminds me of the building assessment too. And, you know,
Mhm. Of course.
it's like, there's only
Yeah.
so much, but what I'm saying is that it just seems like you actually are working on a lot of these things. So that was good
That's
to
right.
hear.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So any more questions for anybody? Comments, questions? Okay, so do we have action items or agenda setting for the next meeting?
John, I don't know. I think we're going to be working with Mark at Questar to complete the extra class audit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Excellent. And so that would be the next topic, along with always getting ready for our fiscal
Yeah.
audit, you know, and talking with Insero about the parameters there and the new GASBs. They'd love to tell us about the new government accounting standards, right, that are coming our way. Which Emily has already been thinking about health insurance wise and all that. And leases, there's new GASBs with that. So, you know, it's going to be an exciting meeting if we talk about that. I'll just say that. So stay tuned.
It's always exciting in audit. So I guess we're done.
Thank you, John.
We were expeditious, were we
Yes,
not,
you
Mr.
were.
Malcolm? Once I figured out I was running the meeting. And I didn't,
Wow.
you know, just a couple of lapses where I forgot I was running